I want to take a minute to thank today's sponsor, Jefferson Monument Works in Jefferson, Iowa. When it comes to honoring a loved one, you want something that lasts, something that tells their story the right way. Ryan and Ryan Nelson recently purchased this long-standing family-owned business, and they're carrying on its legacy of compassion, quality, and craftsmanship. Whether you're planning ahead or honoring someone you love, they'll walk alongside you with care and experience. Visit jeffersonmonumentworks.com or call 515-386-2652 to learn more. Details are in the show notes, because some stories are meant to be set in stone. Welcome to the Rural Dispatch, the podcast delivering stories from rural America. I'm your host, Allie Behrens. Headquartered in rural Iowa, I help run a nationwide livestock transportation company, and I'm here to bring you stories from the people who help shape this industry and our rural communities. Whether you're a trucker, livestock producer, or rural entrepreneur, this show is for you. Each week, we explore the realities of rural business life, from the highways to the fields and everything in between. So buckle up and let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back. I think you are all going to hear a lot of wisdom today. Today's guest is Maury Eickman from Templeton, Iowa, and Maury is 97 years old and a lifelong farmer. Were you raised on a farm?
Yeah, I was born on the farm.
Okay.
And other than a year and a half in the Army, and my wife and I, when we was first married, lived at Carroll 5 years. Otherwise, we've been on this half section all my life, and
Okay.
I'm 97. And so we know a bunch of people around Carroll. The problem is that when you get to 97, most of them are gone.
Yeah.
We're just kind of typical, just kind of everybody pitched in and worked. And we were reasonably successful. We had 720 acres when we finally ended up. And most of that I can kind of attribute to my wife. She came to our marriage with her life savings of $37. And people like that know how to save money.
What year did you get married?
49.
49. Okay.
And I had farmed in 80 and 48. And we got married in 49. And I thought I was rich. I had $4,000 from working for my dad and money I'd saved in the Army. But my dad informed me that $4,000 was going to melt like a snowbank in June. And he was right.
He was right?
Yeah, he was usually right. And he was really right on that one.
How many siblings did you have growing up?
4.
4. Okay.
I had a brother and 3 sisters.
Okay.
And I was rather proud of especially my father's side of the family. We always acted like they was all German, but they weren't. They were from Luxembourg.
Okay.
And in fact, my youngest sister is a fanatic on this roots thing or your ancestor thing. She even belongs to the Luxembourg American Society, and she's been there a few times. And looking at the homes where our ancestors were born and all that type of thing.
Very cool.
I never got into that much, but boy, some people just are fascinated with that.
They are.
She's one of them, and she's good at it.
Mm-hmm.
The president of I don't know what he is now, but the president of the Luxembourg American Society is a cousin of mine.
Oh.
He's a dentist, what do you call it? Orthodontist.
Oh,
you know
orthodontics?
That does surgery that way in California.
Okay.
And a lot of them on my dad's side are doctors and lawyers and college professors and whatnot all.
Wow.
Well, there's a certain amount of nurture, but there also is a certain amount of inheritance.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, my second youngest sister was a college professor. She's retired now. And that's not to knock out anybody that's working on a job. If they're good at it, they're good too.
Mm-hmm. Well, it takes all kinds, right? It takes everybody to make everything work.
Well, I honestly think in America, they're realizing we do need plumbers and mechanics and carpenters.
Yeah.
And, boy, if you want to get something fixed, you find out mechanics are in short supply.
Mm-hmm. It's tough. Just last week, we've got a rental house and the washing machine broke. You think I could find somebody that will come and fix it? That's not easy to do anymore.
No. My grandson ain't all that crazy about it, but he's kind of the designated mechanic around here. And my son always just tells him, well, just tear into it and go over to Dad's computer and find out all you can and go for it. He's never gotten stuck. He always, whatever he went to fix. We don't go in like for diesel engines or something like that.
Yep.
But there's just a whole slug of other things.
Well, and if you can fix it yourself, it'll save you a pile of money, too.
Oh, yeah. Right now, the repair bills on a tractor are far more than what I paid for a tractor.
Yeah, you're right.
I started out with a powerful Ford tractor. Now the lawnmowers have got more horsepower. Nearly everybody that's been successful had a niche one way or another. My dad was an excellent hog man. He really knew what he was doing, and so I kind of learned all I could from him. And we sold quite a little feeder pigs until we made enough money to build a beer farrowing house, and then a few years more a finishing unit, and it just grew into it gradually. And I think the last couple of years they've sold 9,000 head a year.
Oh, wow. Of their own hogs.
They do everything. They farrow them, they AI the sows and farrow them, and all their own repair work, which is a big item, and grind the feed. And I used to grind the feed and haul them to Perry with semis. And now, of course, the grandsons do that.
Mm-hmm.
It makes a big difference. There's people that can have 10,000 hogs, but if somebody else, as they come as feeder pigs and the co-op fills the feeders, and
yep,
that's a little different, and that's everybody's own.
Well, and that's the way that industry has gone.
Yeah.
So nobody's really doing it start to finish anymore on their own.
Well, I think my son is in his early 70s, and he's had pancreatic cancer and a few other things, but he works hard every day. But sooner or later, he's going to have to quit. And I know one of the guys was saying yesterday they had bought something for the farrowing, and he says, I don't know why Dad bought that, because after he's not helping, we ain't farrowing.
Ah. So your son, and then do you have grandchildren that are involved as well?
Yeah, the two grandsons.
Okay.
And we can't let out my daughter-in-law. She does the same thing my wife did. She runs the farrowing house.
Okay.
And we always had a laugh about that. There was a period before the grandsons got old enough to help. We'd have hired men, and, we always got along good with all of them except on one issue. They just found it hard to take orders from a woman. And one day my son told the one, he said, well, if you're going to get along, you're just going to have to make up your mind that whatever Mom says in the farrowing house, that goes. He says, I do what she tells me. Hell, he said, Dad even does what she tells him.
Yep.
My daughter, they got 104 farrowing stalls, and she runs the show.
Okay.
And she's highly capable. And in between times, she seems to find time to take me along to get groceries or to any doctor's appointments. I don't like to drive in Carroll.
Yep.
But Yeah, there's been a lot of changes, some good, some not so good.
What are some of the biggest changes you've seen?
Oh, well, most of our money came out of the hog business, and boy, that used to really be heartbreaking. You could have a hog farrow and you had her in a pen, and it was all bedding and everything was just perfect, and she'd have 8, 9 pigs, and you'd come down the next morning, she's down to 5 because she'd laid on 3 of them, and sometimes you ended up actually taking the survivors and putting them on a different hog because she had laid on all but 2.
Oh, yeah.
Now they'll have 12. Well, she has some that come in with 18 even.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's just the breeding.
The breeding is,
that's
has
no skill on their part.
Yeah.
In fact, I think they overdid it. They'd be better off if they would just have 12. And she really weans a high number. And that's been a big change. Finishing has been a big change. Glenn and Donna bought a finishing unit. I don't know if that's about 3 years ago. Whatever. Time goes fast.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible how much easier it is to load out of there or something. My grandson, Tony, drives a semi, so he's up in there gating. They bring him up. Well, there's so many go in each compartment.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually can feed him hogs just almost faster than he can count and gate. And if you get ahead, you got a mess then, because if you get compartment's supposed to have 25 in and you got 27, you really got to take them out.
Mm-hmm.
You can't crowd. They lose less hogs in trucking than anybody I know. And it's always, if it's hot, they right away back down 2 per pen.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, I've when I used to haul hogs, there'd be different outfits that would haul there, and I don't know, you would think you got to be a slow learner if you lose 10 per load and you keep doing what you're doing when it's hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's taking all the profit out.
Yeah.
When it's extremely hot here, why, we rig up hoses, and my daughter-in-law will be on a stepladder wetting everything down, and my grandson loads every pen at least 2 lighter, 2 head, and they'll go all summer with. I think a year ago, I think they lost 1 from the heat, 2 of them, 1 from the heat, and the one was stressy. Once in a while, you'll get to where they'll just stand there and shake, real excited, and it's a genetic thing.
Okay.
And if you can catch them in time and just get them off the truck and take them a day or 2 later, sometimes it works. But I don't quite understand it. But it was real bad about 20 years ago, but they kind of got that bred out of them. The other changes is feed. Obviously, I started out with a grinder mixer behind a tractor, and then we put in an electric mill, and the electric motors brought the corn up there and everything, and I ground it onto a 2-ton Hyder box on a 3/4-ton pickup. And now my grandson's got a 15-ton tandem axle truck, and it goes quite a bit faster.
Things have gotten a little more efficient.
Yeah, quite a bit. But it is work. They're always, we go to get our own bean mill, and we go to get our own distillers. And then we only hold, I think, right at 50,000 bushel of corn's all we can hold on this place. Okay. So we got hauling it like this year. I think he holds 40 some, and he's printed empty too. And we got 2 full last fall, so he rented a Bennett Gray. So in another week or 2, they got to haul 7,000 home from there. So they're doing a lot of corn trucking too.
Yep.
It just seems as though you would think hogs, you'd be home taking care of hogs. There's times you think all we're doing is trucking.
Yeah, well, imagine if you had to hire somebody to truck all that for you. That's another thing.
That would really, there's years this thing gets pretty thin. But the whole thing is getting a lot tougher. I'm not so sure, but what, in 10 years from now, there won't be any hogs farrowed in Iowa to speak of. They'll be farrowed in Canada or out in Wyoming or western Nebraska or somewhere. There's the PRRS thing, which you always had, and that virus is a lot like COVID, and it keeps mutating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they can't get rid of it. It just you think it's under control, and then it pops back up.
Well, and the China virus is the same way.
Yeah.
It keeps mutating. I talked to a guy a while ago that always, anytime we get together, we talk hogs, and they had sent some blood samples in, and he says it come back number 567. I looked at him, and he says, well, that's such and such a family, and then that number within that family. I think there's 11 families of it. And so to get ahead of that, we use an antagonist, however you call it. They take all samples and mix them together, and then they make a vaccine out of that. Well, that works for about a year, and then the sucker mutates just enough that it don't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll lose a few litters, and then, whoops, we got to get a new one. And then like PED, there's absolutely no cure for that.
Mm-hmm.
They had that, I think, 2 years ago, and they lost 900 head in about 3 days.
Wow.
So that's really fun and games.
Yeah. Yeah. That's tough. And yeah, when there's nothing you can do about it, but just watch it
And that
happen.
was the second time they had it. The time before, he got up at night, and they buy this Birthright. It's a milk product for dairy calves. And he'd feed them that during the night and every 2 hours all day. And they saved about 300. And they just didn't amount to anything. They finally just, when they got to about 60 pounds, they sold them for that roaster market, whatever you call it.
Yep.
Their intestines are just shot. So farrowing in Iowa is just getting to be a disaster.
That's probably a reason why the women are better at it. You got to nurture them a little bit more.
Oh, you can't beat having. If I would never build a farrowing unit in Iowa nowadays on account of the disease, but if I did, and if it wasn't, I'd absolutely find somebody that hopefully had maybe had a little bit of college education on nutrition and veterinary, that type of thing, and had a wife that wanted to partake.
Yeah.
And you could afford to really pay them a good wage.
Yep.
Yeah. No, we had 720 acres of land, and obviously we wouldn't have that if my wife wouldn't have been running she's been gone since 2018, and my daughter got such a kick out of it. She come to the wake at Manning. She's a registered nurse at Harlan. She come to the wake at Manning, and one of the ladies from Manning said, "Oh, we always enjoyed her. So she was so mild-mannered and always had a smile." And I looked at my daughter and I said, "Are we in the right home?"
Are we talking about the same person?
Exactly. Yeah. I called her on that one. I said, "Well, if you have 7 children and was trying to keep a hired man in line and farrowing a few thousand hogs, you'd find out you had a pretty heavy thumb too." No, we really missed her, but she had a brain tumor about 25 years ago, and they only give her about a 50-50 chance of making it, and I never will forget that. Of course, she was in intensive care for quite a while, and finally one day she announced to him at Mayo that she was going to go home, And they said, well, if you can walk down the hall and back, we'll let you go. She said, I got a nurse daughter's a nurse, and them and Maury will take care of me. So, well, we went down the hall quite a ways, and she says, it ain't going to work. We better go back. And that went on for 2 days, and the third day she was determined. She made it clear to the end of the hall and back, and she called them out. She said, I made it down there and back. Now I'm going to go home. So they said, okay.
All right.
And she was determined. And she wasn't home more in about, a couple of weeks. And I had went to town to get something welded and come home. And I asked my daughter, my youngest one was home then yet. I says, where's Mom? She's down at the Farron house. I says, she's what? So I went down there and had a little discussion, and we came up to the house, and I called my daughter, and I said, you got to talk to your mom. I said, she's down at work, wants to be in the Farron house. My God, she just survived,
Yeah.
a brain surgery, and my daughter says, let her go, Dad. When you brought her home, if she'd just sit in a recliner, she'd have never got out. But this way, if she wants to move and do things, you just don't say anything. Well, I says, I can't let her do that. What if she'd fall down there? The neighbors would think I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
No, she says, just let her be.
Yep.
And I made darn sure every time she was around there, I was with her.
Uh-huh.
I was just scared to death of it.
Can't stop her, at least. Watch her.
She was a very determined woman. Well, she was like me. We grew up in the Depression, and you were used to just making do. And my one daughter that lives in Texas, they always come home every year for a week. And just before she came home, she said, say, you and Mom figure out, we want you to talk to her. They got 3 children, and explain to them how it was growing up in the Depression. And I got the biggest kick out of that when they got here. About the second night, we sat around this table, and, well, now, as soon as dishes were put away, you should tell them about growing up in the Depression. And Dottie said, well, there really wasn't anything to it. Everybody else was just as poor as we were.
It's just how it was.
And as far as we always had enough to eat, but the rule was if you didn't can it, you didn't eat it. Mm-hmm. If it, it'd come out of the garden. Mm-hmm. Well, what's some of the hardships? Well, it's just thinking back, the worst hardship, she says, I was pretty little. And Mom and the 2 older girls got up real early, and they picked beans, and they filled a square wash tub, one of those big galvanized ones, with beans. She says, it must have been a good bean year. And they set that under a tree for us, and me and my little sister, we each had a paring knife, and we had to cut the ends off each one. She says, I thought we would never get to the bottom of that wash tub. And that's, for children, that was a lot of what the Depression was,
Yep.
You just, everybody had to work. You did what you could.
Yeah.
I don't know, we always had enough to eat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it took everybody to get that done.
Yeah. It wasn't until I was way older that I always really liked my dad, and I got to appreciate him all the more. He read a lot, and at that time nobody knew anything about vitamins, but he always read. And we all winter long, my family, the kids all had an orange in their lunch bucket.
Yep.
Their Caro syrup bucket.
Ah.
And none of the other kids did, and I'm sure that cost them money.
Yeah, I'm sure it did, because you're not growing oranges in Iowa.
No. It had a downside, though, too. He believed in vitamin D, and that came out of cod liver oil, and at that time, that was some awful stuff. It was nasty.
And he made you...
Well, there wasn't any issue about it.
Yeah?
They poured it in a spoon and you drank it. But I'm sure he was right.
I'm sure, yeah. Wow, yeah.
Yeah, I really can't remember that we had any hardship. Well, like 1936, I vividly remember that.
Okay.
Because that was extreme. I don't think we ever made it further in what we called the wash house. That was just a building just on the end of the sidewalk, and they would wash in there in the summer so it wouldn't be such a mess in the house.
Mm.
And if they butchered or whatever, rendered lard, that was all done out there. And they had one bin was full of cobs, and us kids would have to carry the cobs in and keep the basket by the stove full for Mom. And then Dad would split wood, and we'd carry that in and stack it. And when in 36, that's as far as we ever went. Otherwise, we always kind of helped a little with chores and stuff. But I can remember two of the neighbors had hired men, and nobody had been out for, I think, 10 days. And then the women was talking on the party line, and they got this all put together. And the hired men showed up in the yard with a team of horses and a bobsled. And they put the horses in our barn. And the other neighbor had a pretty decent car. So the four men went to Templeton. Each one had a list. And boy, they were gone about 2 hours. Each one had a list and a scoop shovel. And they made it to Templeton and got everything on the list and come back. And I'll never forget that. My mom really could make good cinnamon rolls. And boy, she quick baked some cinnamon rolls and had the coffee pot on. And they come driving in with the car and was unloading that. And Mom says, well, as soon as you get done with that, why, you'll stop for lunch. And no, they said they don't want to hurt your feelings, but it's getting black in the northwest. And hell, it was only about 3 o'clock,
Oh, yeah.
And I'll never forget that day because it would get real dark and that would be just a wall of real fine snow. And it just blot out the sun. And, you could die out there.
Yeah.
And Dad they ran down to the barn and hooked the horses back up and they took off and we come in the house. And boy, it was kind of strange. The folks didn't say a word. Dad was reading the paper. He's usually reading something. And Mom just kind of sat there, and us kids kind of just looked at each other. And all of a sudden, after about an hour and a half, the phone rang, and Mom ran and answered it. And it was clear across the house, and she hollered back at Dad, they made it home safe. They're alive. And that really makes an impression on a kid.
I suppose it does. That's probably a feeling that sticks with you more than anything.
Yeah, I can remember Dad folded paper up and he just kind of shook his head and he says, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
And then the summer was just as bad. We, our big day of the year was Kinderfest at Manning.
Okay, yep. Which they still do today. That's a big deal.
And, boy, we had worked all summer pumping water by hand because the wells was dry, and they'd kind of try and dig up what they called a post hole well. And you just put a pump and 2 kids on it in the water tank. And when you pumped it out, and that was about it. I don't think it never refilled.
Yeah, that was it.
But we got a dime for this and a dime for that. And I can remember I had $2.86. I was really loaded.
Uh-huh.
and here Dad cut hay the day before Children's Day, and the wind blew hot all night long. And he come in about 11, and he says, I'm sorry, kids, but the hay is dry, and if we don't put it up by tomorrow, it'll be so baked to a crisp that it'll be rolling around in the wind. Oh, we were just crushed. But, those days you didn't say anything.
Yeah.
And so we helped make hay. I drove the horse that pulled the hay up in the barn. And then Mom felt sorry for us. She says, that's all right. She says, Carol's going to have a big blowout on 4th of July, and there's even going to be an airplane there. And it would be a big deal. We'd see an airplane up close.
Mm-hmm.
We got to Carroll, and they was walking down the side ahead of us. We was tagging along, how families do. And I noticed Dad had his arm around her. And, well, those days, people were kind of dignified about that. They didn't even hold hands, They walked at least a foot apart. And I kind of looked at my brother, and all of a sudden they stopped, and Dad said, "I'm sorry, but we got to go home. Mom can't stand the heat. She's going to faint." And she was close to fainting. It got up to 112 that day.
Oh.
So not only did we miss Children's Day, we missed
Man, you had a tough summer.
about 8 or 9 years, whatever it was later, I was dating my wife, and I was telling them that, and my dad-in-law laughed. He says, "Yeah, and you know what? That damn airplane never did show up. It got to Denison and it broke down."
Oh, no. Everybody remembered that summer, huh?
Yeah, they really did. A few years ago, my son-in-law and daughter called me up one Sunday morning. They said, "You doing anything?" And I said, "No, why?" "Well, they had a guy that was a real fascinated with history, and he'd put together a program called The Year from Hell, and he was wondering if we'd want to see that." And I said, "You betcha." So we drove down, and he just had done a marvelous job. Part of it was just still photographs of things.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it was still photographs of newspapers, and some of it was actual movies. And he showed, like roads blocked, snow clear up to the telephone lines, trains stuck. And a thing that I just couldn't believe, there's more people burnt coal, and they weren't set up for wood. And, of course, we didn't have any money, so we were set up to burn wood. Every dead tree in the grove got chopped up. And some towns, it was just desperate for coal, and the trains couldn't get through.
Oh.
So they made quite an issue of that.
Yeah.
That was a year that I was only, I think, 9 at the time. I vividly remember it. And through the years, and I'm sure all farmers were fascinated by the change in the mechanization of farming.
Mm-hmm. Back then, that's another thing. You mentioned the trains. Was that where the grocery store, or I don't know, what did you even call it then? Was it a grocery store, or was it a...
Yeah, actually, this was a little before my time, when the trains were really the lifeblood of the community. You would have a train come in, and they'd stop, unload the stuff, and if they even shipped out from little old Templeton here, they shipped out carloads of potatoes.
Oh.
Yeah, people that put in several acres, and they'd plow them out, they called it, with a potato plow, and Ma and the kids would pick them all up and throw them on a wagon, and every town had a scale. It'd be down by the stockyards, and they would sell hogs or cattle, and the buyers would send them there, and then the scale man would give them a ticket, and then you'd go to where the buyer was, and they paid you.
Okay.
And or the grocery stores handled the potato end of it.
Mm-hmm.
You just brought the ticket in, and there was even kind of like a bartering a lot of that. I can remember my mother, we would haul every Friday or night or Saturday night, I don't know what it was. The merchants would get together, and they'd hang a bed sheet on the side of some house, and the guy would come down from Carroll with a projector and movies. Of course, he only had one projector, so they would run a reel, and then it would stop for a while, and they'd change the reel, and they'd start up again.
Okay.
And it was free.
Yeah.
The merchants would pay in it. And then they'd bring eggs in, and one of the kids that would work there would check in the eggs and give a slip to who took the money, and then Mom would get her groceries, and if she owed them money, she paid it, and if they owed her money, they paid her.
Okay.
And that wasn't just my family. That was pretty much everybody.
Everybody, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Because everybody would bring something different to the table.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Those people that worked in those stores, they really worked. And, yeah, I was thinking that a week or so ago, and I love watching this, how something is really mechanized. We only live 20 or 30 miles, whatever it is, from Rose Acres down here in Guthrie County. That's just that way. Probably ain't even that far. And I don't know how many million hens they got, but it's a lot. And they don't like to have open house. So they solve that by having a camera crew come in and really from A to Z. And that way, you want to see how it works? There you go. And here they had it on Channel 11. And it was about a half-hour program. And I was just fascinated by that. Those hens are in their own little cubbyhole, and the feces drops through and on a belt and out.
oh,
And they lay an egg, and that rolls. The thing is slanting, the floor. It rolls on a belt, and that belt runs all day long. And somehow or other, these people got their hand in something, and these eggs come rolling in, and they can reach down and grab a dozen, and suction picks them up. And then they just put them in a carton, and the other hand, they flip that carton shut and put it in a big case. And they just sit there all day long, a dozen at a time. And honest to goodness, I believe some of those eggs, 10 minutes after they're laid, they're on the way into the cooler. Well, years ago, that's where some farmers made money. The old way of doing that, some of those eggs was pretty old by the time they finally got to market. Well, then somebody that had a small flock, maybe the man would go to town, or the kids going to school, they'd bring them somewhere every day, and it'd be farm fresh eggs. That's what they always, and you could really tell the difference. But this, the way they handle them, they are fresh.
That's amazing. It's just crazy, the amount of automation that people have created.
Yes, it is. It's just you just can't believe it.
And it takes less hands anymore. I mean, how many people, if they had to collect eggs by hand and scoop out the barn and whatever for that many hens, how many people would that take to run that place?
Oh, it'd take a small army.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we kind of have to laugh at this Proposition 12 in California. I was reading where one college professor, I don't know where he was, in ag school, and they said, well, there is a difference in open-range eggs. There are 7 times more salmonella on them than there is those that are in cages.
That's the thing. Our industry got where it is to solve some of these problems. Like you hit on it earlier with the farrowing pens.
Yeah.
There's a reason why they're kept in the crate now.
Right. When Proposition 12 was first passed, one guy says, if I got to quit using farrowing stalls, I'm going to quit because it's just too cruel.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the opposite.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think that things like that are good for your humility. If some issue comes up that you're not at all involved in, you kind of get quiet, because if you figure if those people are that stupid about how to raise feral pigs or how to have hens, maybe I'm just as bad if I'm telling them how to do something else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep. You're exactly right. Well, and that's part of the reason behind telling stories like this, is to educate people a little bit, because unless you're the one doing it, there's a reason for everything. There's a reason why people do the things they do. And just because you don't understand why doesn't mean that it's wrong.
I can see an issue coming up in another 5 or 10 years, and I won't be here to solve it or help solve it. Iowa is divided about in half. It's kind of a slanting line. And the northeast half of it is glacier soils, and the southwest half is more clay loam. And you could hear all of the noise they were making on TV about the nitrate level in the rivers down at Des Moines. And some of that was that way 1,000 years before man came here, because it's just the vegetation falling into the river and decaying is going to cause nitrate. But there is no doubt that if you put nitrogen on in the fall and you got sandy soil and you don't use a nitrate inhibitor, there's a certain amount of that that's going to end up in the tile lines.
Mm-hmm.
Where here, if they would just require all of us to use this inhibitor to keep it from converting, it goes from NH3 to nitrite. NH3 doesn't erode. Nitrite will. And if it's below 50 degrees, if they put it on late enough and use that inhibitor, it just is not going to come out of our tiles between that and the clay soils.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just so afraid that in time to come, if they can pressure the legislature to come with some strict restrictions on that, they're going to paint everybody with the same brush.
Mm-hmm.
Well, us guys here, we got hills and contour and terrace to put up with.
Yeah.
But we got one advantage. Our nitrogen don't go out the tile because clay hangs onto it. And I hope we got legislators smart enough to know that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why it's important that farmers do get involved, because the legislatures will blanket everyone.
Yeah.
They don't know the difference.
My one grandson takes quite an interest in Farm Bureau. And if he's got to quit early some evening to go to the meetings or whatever, I encourage that, because we need them to educate the people in town. They're not being vicious. They just don't know.
Yeah, right. Well, and nowadays everyone is so far removed from the farm, whereas your generation, everyone grew up on the farm.
Actually, I swear my son produces pork with less water pollution on 9,000 a head than what I used to produce with maybe 500 head. We'd have hog floors, and if it rained hard, the water would wash it off, and man, the hog floor is perfectly clean.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it all went down the creek.
Yep.
Now they're all confined. It's in a pit, and that's one of the few things I can help with on farming yet. I sit on a tractor at the first pump, either at the lagoon or at his big finisher, and then it goes to a great big booster pump, and through a quarter of a mile, even up to a third of a mile of hose, and he's putting it underground.
Yep.
Chiseling it in. And he just spent a small fortune getting new drag hose. His was getting to where it was breaking pretty frequently. They wear because you're dragging them all the time.
Yep.
And, well, I think he wanted a bigger one anyway. And he can control the big booster pump from the applicator pump. He's got I don't know what you'd call a laptop or something in there.
Yep.
And it tells him what the oil pressure is and how hot the motor is and what the manure pressure is and what the vacuum is and the whole bit. And if anything goes wrong, it'll shut itself off. I swear they can produce that 9,000 with less pollution than what I did the first years I farmed.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and so like you said, they're well-meaning, but a lot of people in the city, when they see the big confinements, they're polluting. Mm-hmm. No, they're not.
Yeah.
They are saving pollution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So that part of it's kind of fun. I enjoy that.
Yeah. Did you ever imagine that this is what the industry would look like?
Well, we always tried to kind of stay up on everything and ahead. We had some of the first farrow stalls. We had some of the first slats around. And for manure, we pumped it into the lagoons, and then we bought a bunch of obsolete irrigation equipment from Nebraska, stuff that they didn't want to use anymore. Well, then my son had a fairly serious heart attack. He kind of inherited that from his mother. That's what she ultimately died from. And the women had a meeting and informed us that we were not going to irrigate manure anymore. And it appeared that my wife and my daughter-in-law, and it didn't look like it was negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when we lucked out and we found a used drag hose, and it's kind of complicated to the guy on it. You really got to be thinking ahead. I know 2 different operators that spent probably in excess of $500,000 on a drag hose operation, used it a year, and then sold it.
Oh.
They couldn't find anybody that could run it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, this guy over at Grand Junction just told my son what to do and how to do it, and we got home and away we went. He got the hang of it. That's one regret I have of my life that I would definitely do different. I would take a few more days off.
Well, especially with animals, it's hard to get away.
Yeah, my son and daughter-in-law are going to be taking off, I think, next week. And when they get back, the one grandson is going to take off for a week.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, I encourage it.
Yeah.
With hogs or dairy or something, it's 6.5 day weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's just, I don't think the good Lord intended us to have our nose to the grindstone quite that hard.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. It's important to take a little break.
A little break now and then.
It's important for your own self and probably for your relationships too.
Oh, yeah. Of course, it depends on how the other part of the relationship grew up. Those of us that grew in the Depression, we went to Branson once, and they had free tickets to one show, and what they're trying to do is sell you on a, what do you call it, timeshare.
Oh, yes.
That gimmick.
Yep.
And so, well, we got through that. We aren't going to buy no timeshare. But then that night, I said, well, what show do you want to go to? And I had a brochure, and she looked at that, and she says, why, that's $35 a piece. I said, yeah. Well, she says, we're not going to pay $70 to go to a show. Well, I said, we're not going to go home and tell the kids we sat in a hotel and looked at each other.
Yes.
They'll think we're idiots. It took a little while to convince her, and we finally she was tired of bark on a tree, and for good reason. You grow up in a family of 10, and her dad was sick a lot. Boy, you learn to hang on to every penny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a hard thing to break yourself of.
Yeah, I know what few trips we did go on. She always went through the menu at a restaurant until she found the cheapest thing on it, and that was all right. I'm sure it was nutritious.
Well, yeah. Well, some people today could probably benefit from doing a little more of that.
We're way too much the other way.
Yeah.
There's one ad on TV advertising debt relief, and I can't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
They, they're in such terrible trouble, and well, then they go to this place, and oh my God, this is so wonderful. Now my husband and I can go on a trip. If I got debt wrote down because I owed you and your husband money, and then my wife and I'd go on a trip, how would you look at that?
Wouldn't be very happy with you.
No, that's simply not moral.
It's not right. But it's common anymore. That's just people think that's okay.
Yeah, I just my son and I are kind of touchy on that. Back in the 80s, we were losing a lot of money, and we had incurred a lot of debt. We had built a large building over on where he lives. And so naturally, we were pretty tight on anything. Well, everybody drove their car and their pickup till they had 300,000 on them and was falling apart. There's only so much you can do with that. And we, at that time, were raising gilts for farmland to sell. And, well, that was all right. But we had to feed their feed, and we got it from Audubon. And, well, it turned out we was their second biggest customer at that co-op. And the nicest guy was their counterman. And he told me, he says, well, you and Glenn are going to get a $1,200 dividend. And, oh, boy, we were tickled pink. Because come January, he's going to have that money. Here one day he come driving in and looking kind of down-faced, and he says, I didn't want you to find this out by mail. He said, I went to the 3 biggest feeders, but he said we had a couple guys declare bankruptcy on us, and he says, there's no dividend. You lost your $1,200. And we were not happy.
I bet not.
No, that was the only bright spot in the whole year, and that left.
Yeah. Oh.
So I don't know. Everybody's got to do what they think is right, but I had the greatest amount of admiration for the Templeton Bank, how they handled things through that era. If a loan didn't look like it was going to work, they told them ahead of time, no, we don't think we want to do this. And they only had 1 or 2 that they wrote down, and I think 2, and both of them were cancer. And you really got to admire them for that. And you can't hold it against the, I guess you'd call it victims.
Yeah. Because
nobody looks for cancer, and if the breadwinner's got cancer, it's pretty tough to.
Yeah, that's one of those things that's
excusable.
Yes, yeah.
Totally excusable.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they were glad to do it because they were a highly successful bank and they could afford to do it, so they did it.
Yep. Yeah, that's kind of the beauty of working with a small town business, that there's real people that you're dealing with. It's not some...
Well, you don't want to drag religion into everything, but they're just good Christians, to put it bluntly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of irritates me when you'll hear somebody or see a program or something, and they always portray the banker as this evil guy that's just trying to sell out the poor, struggling guys. No, not really.
Exactly.
I, in a foolish moment at that time, back in the 80s, was asked to be on the board for FFA or FHA, whatever. And in a weak moment, I agreed. Oh, you'd really learn a lot. Yeah, I learned a lot. And there's just some of the things, you'd think, don't you people think? We had one guy that actually came in, and the field man, the employee, had more or less agreed to an extension on his indebtedness, and he had just come in there, and we were supposed to sign it. And, oh, yeah, by the way, he says, my pickup was getting old, so I got a new pickup, but that interest on there is pretty high. You'll have to pick that up. And there was only 2 of us on the board, and my partner blew up. He says, what do you mean we got to pick that up? We didn't tell you to buy a new pickup. And mine had 300,000 on it, and I was on the board.
Yep. Yeah.
What's wrong with this picture? I took the road from Carroll. I'd take the home on gravel because I knew Pernod all of those people from Roselle on down. And I figured if it conks out, I can walk this.
Yeah.
And it was getting about that bad. And, it rubs you the wrong way.
It does. Yeah. Well, and you've lived through the Depression and the 80s, and everyone is so leveraged now. I don't want to say everyone, not everyone, but there's a lot of people that are so leveraged with debt. If the market takes a turn, they're in big, big trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not real sure how this is going to go the next year or 2. if we get a bumper crop of corn, that sucker is going to be down below cost of production, and I'm sure the government's going to do everything they can do to help, but there's a limit to what they can do.
Yeah, well, they can't print money forever, right?
That will destroy a country. My
Mhm.
father instilled that into me. He always said, it seems as though we're stuck with 2.5% to 3% inflation. But he says you have that about so long, and then people want more and more prosperity, so the politicians give in, and then you get hyperinflation.
Mhm.
And look what the land price did.
Yep.
There's no way in the world that a young couple can buy a farm.
No, it's almost impossible. I
You're
mean,
just priced out of the market.
they are, yeah.
Well, hell, even guys like me, it's priced out of the market.
Yeah, yeah.
When Dottie and I got this paid for, well, our next thing was to buy another one. And when we got that paid for, you bought another one. And when we got that paid for, you bought one more.
Mm-hmm.
You don't do that now.
You buy one, and you're probably paying for it for the rest of your life.
Rest of your productive years.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you get one paid for years ago that you didn't need to pay rent, and you really kept your nose to the grindstone, and you were good at cattle or good at hogs, and found out what you were good at and really pushed it, you actually, in another 10 years, you bought another farm. That don't happen now anymore.
No, there's no young people getting started on their own anymore.
No, the young couples are just froze out completely.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be if a guy had 4 or 5 children, and when they got the age to marry, if a farm come up available, especially if it was close, he'd actually give them maybe $5,000 for a down payment. Mm-hmm. So there was no strings attached. And just tell them, now, remember, this comes out of your share when I die. And boy, if they had that much down and the bank went along with it, why, everything worked out great. Mm-hmm. Maybe they used some of Dad's machinery, but
times are changing.
Well, see, that's a factor, and I'm as guilty as anybody. There's only really 2 things I know that are safe to put your money in. That was land and gold. Well, us hicks out here, we don't know how in the hell to buy gold. If we've got, say our sons pay us rent and we got an extra $50,000 in the bank. Well, if they can have all the ads in the world they want to put on TV, we just don't understand the gold exchange, the gold market, or anything. It's just not our thing.
Right.
So what do? They save it up until they got enough, and they buy a farm, even if it's paying twice too much. Because land they understand.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I would argue that it's better that someone who understands land needs to own it versus somebody who has no idea how to manage it.
Yeah, that is true. We live in some kind of weird times, and I can't say I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
Because there's just a lot of people my age are real concerned about it. We had estate plans that we drew up 10, 20 years ago. And in our case, my wife passed away. Why, I think it was only $3,000-4,000, settled everything. We got all done, and I asked the attorney, I said, well, if I die tomorrow, what will it cost the kids? He said, wouldn't know why it'd be any more. Well, for a while, it looked like they were going to take the stepped-up basis away from us, and they were going to limit the total top cutoff. And good Lord, I was just visiting an attorney about another matter, and I brought that up, and he says, oh, yeah, if you die now, Maury, it'd be over $1 million. Well, we worked our tail off to get this land paid for. Dottie would turn over in her grave if she knew it cost $1 million to settle the estate.
Yeah, you have to sell the land to pay the taxes on it. I mean, there's no other choice a lot of times.
She was very opinionated on that. She said, we got to get our estate settled up. And so we went to a meeting that I think the Methodists put on in Manning Church. Just estate planning, and they were upfront about it. They explained that they had a fund that if people wanted to put money with it, they would pay so much interest, And then when you died, they give it back to you, but they used it as a revolving fund for building churches. But at the same time, they give a whole bunch of lessons on planning estates and the tax ramifications and stuff. And it was really a good deal. I admired them. We happen to be Catholic, but that didn't make any difference.
Yeah.
Well, but we should go to an attorney. Well, we went to one attorney that came through, and we got out of there, and Dottie said, you know what? I don't think a guy should go to an attorney that's just gone through a divorce. Yeah, I said, I noticed he really hates women, don't he? So that was a flop. Finally, then my son-in-law ran the airport up at Denison, and the guy that he bought it from and kind of grew up with, and eventually they owned not the airport per se, they owned the business and some planes and stuff. They're down on Atlantic now, but the guy that he worked with was real well-to-do, and he had a couple of aunts that was real well-to-do. And so they did a lot of estate planning, and he told me we should go down to, he mentioned some lawyers in Des Moines. And my sister is one of these that goes through all this ARP stuff.
Yep.
She has a master's degree in geriatric care for the elderly. That's what she did for the last 40 years. And she says, oh my gosh, they got a 5-star rating. Well, their fee was 5-star too, but it was worth it. They really got this thing set up. So our getting by cheap was all due to her. Because I'd never got it done. You're always busy doing something else.
Well, yeah, it's not a priority for a lot of people.
I really don't know by now. I think right now I'm getting along fairly good. I'm taking some cancer treatment and a few other odds and ends. But if my demise would be imminent, I think I'd maybe have the kids take me down there and we'd go over everything. And because in 8 or 10 years, things really change.
Mm-hmm. It does. And I think that's awesome that you think that, because it is important that everybody's on the same page and knows what's going on, and this is why.
Well, you know, this whole wild inflation, and that's all we can call what got, makes it very difficult for everybody to be mellow and agreeable on settling an estate. You maybe one of the older kids wants to buy land or buy something, and well, you got 100,000 kind of just on CDs, so you give that to them, and they know it's going to come off of their share.
Yep.
Well, 20 years later, if another child gets 100,000, there's an awful inequity there.
Yeah.
How do you balance that all out? And I thought my wife handled it real well. She said, Dad and I are just going to do our best, and you are just going to have to do your best to get along with it.
Well, and fair is not always equal, right?
No. And also, we're all parochial. We all look out for ourselves. That's human nature.
Yep.
So if you got 7 children, which we do, and they ask how an estate should be settled, you're going to have 7 opinions.
Yes, you are.
So she really stressed that. You all are going to have to make up your mind.
Yeah.
And between her and I, we decided, about 20 years ago already, that it didn't make sense for us to accumulate more land. So we started distributing, and you can distribute a lot of money, especially if you got 7.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, at that time, it started out, it was 11,000. Well, what's that? Well, to begin with, if the husband can give 11,000, the wife can get 11,000.
Yep.
And you can give to that husband and wife. So right away, you're up to 44,000.
Yeah.
Well,
times 7 is a lot.
Yeah, a few years you've worked down any CDs that are going to make your estate highly taxable.
I applaud you for having the foresight to to think about that and do that, because there's a lot of people that don't. They just think it's not my problem. When I die, they can deal with it.
Oh, no. You'll have to remember that Dottie never claimed to have any knowledge whatever of legal stuff. But every time both Successful Farmer and Farm Journal seemed to really push that.
Mm-hmm.
And printed every other issue would have an extensive article on estate planning. And I'd plunk that. Yet when I was done eating supper, that would be on my plate. Here, you read that and tell me what it all means.
Yep.
And so she was the emphasis for that. I can't take any bows.
She sounds like a good woman.
She really had a head for business.
Mm-hmm.
She actually kept the books for the whole farm operation when we were raising thousands of hogs. And my daughter-in-law had 4 kids. She was busy with that. She wrote all the checks. And I mean, if you raise a lot of hogs and stuff, it don't take too long to where your operation grows to like over $1 million a year she was handling. And Verna Frank from Carroll, she probably was before your time. She was a bookkeeper. She taught her how to do double entry bookkeeping. And I just loved it. Boy, anything come up, what you paid for.
Well, and then you both are on the same page too, because she knows what's going on. You know what's going on. That probably makes not only the business itself run a little bit smoother, but your marriage too, I would imagine.
I really think you're 100% right. You know that a man that doesn't let his wife in on everything, and I mean everything, then if he runs into hard times, she's going to really be upset. Well, what the hell did you do here?
Mm-hmm.
Where she was in on it every day. She knows the struggles. And
you wonder nowadays when so many women have a job in town off the farm, and farms are a large asset, right? And you have to know what to do with it. Otherwise, you're in trouble. So if something happens and everybody's not on the same page and knows what to do, you could have a big problem on your hands.
A major problem. My kids never know what to get me for Christmas, so I always get a bunch of books. And that top one over there is Not My First Rodeo. It's by Kristi Noem. She governor of South Dakota, and now she's head of Homeland Security.
Mm-hmm.
Really a sharp gal. I've always admired the women that got into politics. This Kristi, I get a kick out of her. In one article, what she was trying to get across is to look at things from other people's viewpoint. And she had her little girl with her. And they farmed that big that they kind of had their own child daycare center after her brother got married and everybody. Well, that day that somehow or other somebody was missing, so she took her in a cab with her. And every 3 hours, they'd bring out something to eat. They started when it was dark in the morning. And, well, they was trying to finish this one field. And so every 3 hours, some more food would come out. And, of course, the little girl, she was only 3, she'd eat, and then she'd curl up in a blanket in the cab and sleep. And she was in great shape. She had done that about 4 times, and it's 2 the following morning. And Kristi Noem was still running his combine, and she finally called her brother on the radio, and she says, "Don't you think we better hang it up?" He says, "Yeah, I was hoping." So she told her little girl to pick up her toys, and she kind of ignored her. And, of course, Kristi had been running this thing for about 18 hours. And she said, "I said, pick your toys up and put them in the box." And the little stinker says, "Ooh, somebody's crabby." And she says, "I was about to reach down and slap her, and then I got to thinking, I'm totally shelled. All day long I've been trying to hit the grain cart and not hit any corner posts and staying on the row. Here, this little digger, she'd been eating and sleeping all day."
Uh-huh.
In her eyes, there was no emergency about putting things away and going to bed.
Yeah.
She says, and So he says she learned in the legislature, if you're really going to get along, look at it from the other guy's viewpoint, especially if he vehemently disagrees with you. Look completely at his viewpoint and try and get around and convincing him on those points.
Yeah. Well, that's something I try to remind myself of, too, because there's a lot of radical opinions out there.
Oh, boy,
and
you know it.
Try to remind myself that some experience made somebody think that way.
Yeah.
Now, I might not ever understand it, but I try to be mindful of that.
That's exactly the point she made.
Yeah.
Another thing in her book, they had these, I think, 2 girls, and then they had this boy. And I guess he was being a little brat one day, and she kept telling him how bad he was and how she should shape up. And her own mother was there babysitting, and she says, Chris, quit telling him he's a bad boy. He's going to be what you tell him. She says, show him what you want done. Show him how to be a good boy. Show him what you expect of him. And she says, I hate to be a farm wife and 3 kids, and my mother was showing me how stupid I was. She said, I approached discipline from a positive angle. She said it made a big change.
I have 2 little boys, so I'll have to remember that.
But Dottie handled that. She handled I was usually out grinding feed.
Yep.
And boy, they knew there was no back talk. Your job is to love them and to teach them, but also to discipline and mold them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and part of loving them is disciplining them and not letting them grow up to be an entitled brat.
Yeah. When she took her down to Des Moines, she was having another heart attack. She just seemed as though, well, it's like one doctor told me, Dr. Woods. He says, Maury, some people could eat cardboard and their bodies would make cholesterol out of it and plug them up. I told him she really watches her diet and everything, and she had 12 stints.
Wow.
Until it finally didn't work.
Yeah.
But coming back from the hospital, I'm sitting in the back seat, and my daughter went down to pick me up so I wouldn't need to drive home, and I think I rode down to the ambulance. I don't remember how that all went. But anyhow, I was thinking, oh, my God, how am I going to tell Sarah? That's one of Glenn's granddaughters. And from little Tyke on, she just worshipped Dottie. Mm-hmm. And no particular reason. That some people just click together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when we got together like you do before a funeral, I hunted her up and I said, well, I really hate this. I said, I kind of figured it was going to happen one of these times. She ain't going to keep getting stints forever. And, I said, I was really concerned about you, Sarah. Oh, no, she said, that's just fine. She says, Grandma told me about 6 months ago that she wanted to go. Her knees hurt her so bad and she couldn't stand any surgery on them. Mm-hmm. So, no, she says, Grandpa, this is just good. She's where she wants to be. I thought, I'll be danged. She even took care of that.
She even did, yep. She really knew what she was doing. She took care of everybody.
Took care of everybody. She even covered that. And part of that, with the grieving process, you should stop and think. And I went to see my sister. She lives in Wisconsin now. She's 80. They should be retired, but she still handles a whole bunch of clients with the computer and her telephone. She's a planner or an expediter for elderly. Well, she has a master's degree in that. But anyhow, her church group likes to put on seminars for different stuff. So here when I was up there, she got stuck for being the speaker for a group of that after the service. And anybody that was widowed or divorced or anything could join, and they was going to have meetings every month or whatever, kind of a grief counseling type thing. Mm-hmm. And they have a lady full-time handling this. It's a very well-to-do parish. And then she introduced my sister, and then my sister went on and on about it and stuff. And then they started with the first lady, and each one had so one or two of them was divorced, one or two of them, or quite a few of them were widows. Then of all things, she looked at me and says, "Well, Maury, it's your turn." And when you get stuck on something like that, about all you can do is, like they say, you speak from your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I really think that the good Lord was looking out for me. I said, I wasn't that smart when I was 20, 21. But I said, I really ended up with a wonderful wife. And I said, we almost made 70 years. And I said, she helped me with the farming. She drove tractor day after day and farrowed hogs and whatnot all. But her main thing was she raised a family of 7 kids, and none of them ever got in trouble. And I said, when she died, I just figured, well, you're a very, very lucky man. And I says, that'll, more than anything you can do, will help you carry grief. And by God, on the way home, Myra said, hey, you got out of that pretty good. I said, well, I really feel that way.
Yeah.
I said one time I went to a wake for a neighbor that was the nicest guy. And when I said we had 2 other guys in that neighborhood that were alcoholics, and they were mean. And I said, I didn't hunt up this newly widowed woman. It just happened as we sat down, she ended up sitting next to me. And I told her, well, Lucille, this is really tough. He'd gotten cancer, and boy, he was gone in 3 months.
Oh.
I said, you had a wonderful husband. I said, some women never had a wonderful husband. So I said, I know you're grief-stricken, but you were still a lucky woman. And she reached over and squeezed my hand. She said, thanks, Maury.
It's perspective, right? If you can be grateful for what you did have and not dwell on what you lost.
Yeah, life is kind of what you make it. And if you're going to farm, you better be getting used to it. You can dry out one year and hail out the next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and you're right. It's what you make of it. And to romanticize what you do makes it a little bit more tolerable when it's tough times.
Yeah.
Because it is a good life.
Yeah, they always say you live poor and die rich. And Dottie and I said, that does seem to be our,
mm-hmm.
Well, not rich compared to multimillionaires, but
everybody always likes to talk about the old guy in overalls in town and dirt on his hat, and you don't know that guy's the millionaire, but that's everybody around here in a farming community. Everyone is wealthy. It's a different kind of wealth.
You're so right. I can remember when I was a little shaver, and you kind of learned at that time to kind of look at things, but keep your mouth shut. And we had this old boy that lived, about 3 miles from us. And he drove a Model T. And hell, this was on into the 30s, and anybody that had any money at all was driving like a Model A or a Chevy. And one day I told Dad, I said, well, gal, he's got 2 farms. How come he's driving that old car? He's rich compared to us. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dad said, very much so. But he said, some guys absolutely can't learn to shift gears. And he says, on the Model A, you had a couple of pedals. You stepped on one and you backed up. You stepped on the other and you went ahead. Then when that clicked in gear, then you pulled the throttle down. I said, didn't they have a foot feed? He says, some of the early ones didn't. He said, don't you remember when some of the old timers had come up to a stop sign, they'd pull up and they'd look both ways and that motor was just going, and then they'd step on it, vroom, they'd lurch out. See, they didn't use a clutch. They didn't know how to use a clutch.
Ah, yep.
So it's just...
So that was why. It wasn't because he couldn't afford it.
No, it wasn't. He could have probably afforded 10 Model A's, and he wouldn't need to buy a Model T, but he couldn't drive it. Mm-hmm. You got to make do with what you got.
That's a good story.
if you live to be in your 90s, there's a lot of things if you just shut up and observe, you do see.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen a lot.
Well, my folks were very kind and loving, but they were strict. But I don't ever remember being slapped. And one of the things they kind of really leaned on was, well, Dad smoked a little, but they were so close with money, he didn't smoke a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And practically zero on alcohol, just if they had company, they'd serve some.
Okay.
And no late hours. And I don't know if I told you that or not, the second date I had with my wife.
Mm-mm.
Well, I met her when I was home on furlough, and then we wrote to each other. And when I got home about 8 months later, we went on a date. I asked her if she'd want to go again. So, yeah, that was fine. Well, on the second date, Arcadia Legion Hall was brand spanking new at that time.
Ah.
Just been built. One of my buddies proceeded to get drunk. She didn't say anything. We got home and to her place, and I asked her, well, if she'd want to go on another date. She said, well, there's something we should talk about. I said, oh, yeah. She says, I don't believe in smoking. That's a stupid waste of money. And she says, if you ever get drunk, it will be the last date. And she didn't believe in late hours. There's a decent time to get home.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some guys might have thought she was kind of tough, but you know what? A doctor once asked me how I lived that long, and I told him that story, and he said, she saved your life.
Yep.
I really do think that was right. That is stupid. Well, not like a couple if they want to go somewhere and sit down and have a drink.
Yeah.
That's acceptable. I know some of my children do, or in-laws do. That's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But this idea of getting or using drugs or anything, that really isn't acceptable. I'm always been a practicing Catholic, and I shouldn't be saying that on a podcast, but
That's okay.
I really think they were too lax on alcohol consumption.
Mm-hmm.
Good Lord, we have Holy Name Society meetings here, and they served alcohol at the time when it was illegal to serve alcohol by the drink.
Well, what amazes me is how prevalent alcohol is in Carroll County.
Oh.
There's a lot of it around.
Yeah. In this neighborhood, I could pick out 3-4 guys that, like my dad always said, left a young widow.
Mm.
I was looking, my dad was orphaned when he was only 3. There were 4 kids in the family, and his dad just died suddenly, and a year later his mother died.
Oh.
Well, in those days, the aunts and uncles would get together, and each one took kids. And he was raised by his aunt on his father's side, Mrs. Reesberg. She was just a super wonderful lady. But he just never believed in that. He thought that was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So they just thought that was not permissible.
Yeah, it's interesting how times change and how that can, from a young age, affect how people behave long into their lives.
Well, I often laugh. I hear about guys will say, well, my boy was a good kid, but then he went to the Army or Navy or whatever, and they ruined him. He come back, he was drinking. I think it's just the opposite. When I got drafted and I was in the service and I saw some of those guys that really drank, and my gosh, when it was in Louisiana through the summer, and some of them about died, from the heat and the humidity. And my dad was probably 20 years older than them, and I'm sure he wouldn't have liked it, but he just stood it. That takes a toll on you. And the worst of it is, well, it's in the end, it's always the children that pay, the wife and children.
Yeah, it is. You're right.
But I think that's getting a lot better. For one thing, wives simply won't put up with that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
About the second time he comes home drunk and knocks her down, she's going to see a lawyer, and they're going to explain to him that if you do that again, you won't never drink again because you won't have any money.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to pay alimony, and you're going to pay child support, and you're going to be too broke to even go in a bar.
Well, and there's so many more resources for women now, too. We're not at a man's mercy. We have choices to...
Well, not only that, but I think the woman's parents, I know, well, we had, like I said, 5 daughters, and if any of them would have been in that situation, I would have intervened. I'd have said, hey, you're not doing this. Normally, you stay out of that because you never add anything to it. It's just sort of, if you get your nose in their marital trouble, we only make it worse. But when it comes to, especially if they get abusive, you are not being a right parent if you don't interfere.
Yeah. Well, and you never stop being a parent, right? It doesn't matter how old your kids are. You're always gonna be
but
there.
Usually you like to help silently. But,
well, it sounds like you're pretty proud of all of your kids.
And we were lucky, and that's just luck. That's all Dottie ever worried about. She knew I wanted boys so bad. And she always, when the girl would come, she always say, well, as long as they got 10 fingers and 10 toes and they're bright, we'll just thank the good Lord.
Yep. Well, that's truly what matters, right? Healthy babies and that they...
Yeah, you got to have your priorities straight.
Yep.
I always said I wanted Glenn to be a doctor, and he did good in school. And then he started on pre-med at Omaha, but he just didn't like cities. He didn't want to marry a city girl. I think he went 1.5 years, and he wanted a farm. I always told him, damn, it'd have been cheaper to making you a doctor.
Isn't that the truth? Man. But, some people, farming is in their blood, and that's what they're made to do.
He was just genuinely good at it. I had it was kind of way ahead of its time, but I just had a Farm All H hooked up to a real heavy 2x8 built thing on posts with a power takeoff, and it ran an auger. It ran 2 augers and a corn cleaner.
Okay.
All rigged up with roller chains. And my dad helped at that time, and I didn't want him to go near that thing. Well, what I should have done was put shields over the whole shebang, because OSHA would have had a fit, and they should have. So actually, Glenn started running combine when he was only about 16.
Oh.
And you really learn good when you're young.
Yes.
He got that good that as that one Massey Ferguson combine we had got older, naturally, or more things went wrong. And he'd come driving in the yard, and I'd come walking down. Now what? Well, I don't know, but it don't sound quite right. So I'd carefully walk around. Sure enough, there was a bearing going out somewhere, and he could tell just by sitting in the cab listening. That's skill.
That is. That's impressive.
To this day, I don't think he ever puts the radio on unless he's just trying to catch the weather forecast. He's listening, because, boy, if you can catch something before things go all to hell, or bearings will catch on fire. We had a bin here on fire once from a bearing that went out in an auger.
Oh.
And that's kind of nasty. You can't put them out. No, we ended up just chopping holes in it and draining the corn out. We had the crazy idea we could auger out the hot corn. Well, that kind of caramelizes into a chunk. You can't move that. What you got to do is let all the good corn out. And then you can put that out.
Oh, dang. The things you learn, right? I'm sure there were a few hard lessons.
Oh, yeah, but if you got a bad day or a bad week or a bad year, it makes you appreciate the good ones.
Well, this was great. You've got some great memories and some great stories, and I appreciate you sharing them. Okay, to wrap up, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you to Maury Eickman. At 97 years old, he is sharper than most people half his age. And the way he remembers the details of nearly a century of farming is nothing short of remarkable. It's rare to sit down with someone who's seen the changes he's seen and lived through challenges he's lived through, and he still speaks with such humor and wisdom and perspective. Maury, thank you for sharing your stories with me and with everyone listening. I'm honored to have had this conversation, and I hope you all enjoyed it as much as I did. We'll see you next week.